In this video, we will review how and when to file Forms 1099 NEC to report payments made to your subcontractors and other non-employee workers during the tax year. I often hear a lot of confusion related to this tax compliance requirement from prospective clients and new clients alike. I've never done this in the past. My tax preparer has never mentioned this to me before. Why should I do it now? My buddy at the Home Builders Association chapter meeting said he's never done this before. I'm purchasing a product from this business. They aren't providing a service. Well, did they install that product? Because that then becomes a service subject to 1099 reporting. I'm here to clarify how and when to file Forms 1099 NEC, and at the end of this video, I will outline the penalties for failure to file this informational return. This video does not get into Forms 1099 miscellaneous, however, I can walk through this form separately. So if you'd like to see a video on Forms 1099 miscellaneous, let me know by commenting on this video. All right, here we go. Forms 1099 NEC, NEC standing for non-employee compensation. This is any non-employee worker, and there is no need to file a Form 1099 NEC for an employee who you pay through payroll and provide a W-2 at the end of the year. Forms 1099 NEC are due to the IRS and your workers by January 31st of the subsequent tax year. So for tax year 2023, if you paid a worker combined payments that total $600 or more during the tax year 2023, Forms 1099 NEC are due by January 31st of 2024. And this is an annual procedure related to your home builder business or any other activity you're involved in with a profit motive. So let's say you also operate rental properties for additional passive income. You'll want to consider whether you paid workers related to this activity a total of $600 or more during the tax year. Again, just to recap, workers paid in the course of your business who are paid $600 or more during the tax year, you need to file a Form 1099 NEC. So pretty much every one of your subcontractors will need a Form 1099 NEC filed with the IRS, and you'll provide that same form to the subcontractor on or before January 31st so they can file their tax return and include that Form 1099 NEC in their reporting. As a GC, your non-employee workers are your subcontractors as well as any professional service providers you paid throughout the year. But what if my subcontractor operates as a company? And I get that question a lot as well. And there seems to be a bit of confusion around this. And so how do you know what type of company they are unless you have that Form W-9? The only companies who are optional for Form 1099 NEC reporting are those companies organized as corporations. Well, you think they're corporations? Again, there's only one way to know that is to have the signed Form W-9 on hand and to receive that Form W-9 before work commences on your project so you can understand how that subcontractor's business is organized. Sole proprietor, single member LLC, LLC making the S-Corp election, corporation, that's the only way to truly know. This is why it is a very good idea to collect a signed Form W-9 from your subcontractors and other service providers before work commences. If you want to see more on this topic, you can check out our YouTube video on subcontractor documents. And if you're not quite sure how to interpret the data on a Form W-9, I encourage you to watch one of our videos on how to fill out Form W-9. Sole prop, single member LLC could be a good place to start. So what do I do now if I've paid a worker during the year for services performed and they didn't give me a W-9? So I'd go ahead and request their signed W-9 now so you have it available when you go to file their Form 1099 NEC. Throughout the course of the year, you are likely paying other fees for professional services, like to an accountant or an attorney or some other service provider. Your accountant will receive a Form 1099 NEC unless their company is organized as a corporation. Your attorney will receive a Form 1099 NEC regardless of whether their company is organized as a corporation. And we'll get into more details on that in just a minute. So how do you actually file Forms 1099 so the IRS and your workers will receive the reporting on time? For this, I highly recommend electronically filing the forms. And so the IRS for tax year 2023 and beyond now has a requirement that if you're filing 10 or more forms, you're going to be required to file those forms electronically. So no more paper filing the 1099s if you are filing 10 or more forms. If you typically handwrite your Forms 1099, first of all, it's a whole lot easier to electronically file these forms. And there are several options online when it comes to electronically filing these forms. All right, now we're at one of the options to file the forms. This is the IRS's proprietary option. IRS, which you can Google IRS if you want to. That's one way you could find it. You can also just observe the URL here that I have in my browser. And here's a note, what I just mentioned, that starting in tax year 2023, if you have 10 or more of these forms, you must file them electronically. And so this is how you use IRS. One thing of note here, you'll notice here in the third bullet point, download payee copies to distribute. The IRS, you can e-file to the IRS, but you'll also want to make sure that you distribute the copies to your subcontractors and other workers. So to get started, you'll register with the IRS portal. At the time of this recording, they are doing their year-end maintenance, but by the time you see this, they will no longer be having a service outage, hopefully. So that's one option, using the IRS's IRIS system to file the 1099s. Another couple of options, Avalara 1099, formerly known as Track 1099. This is a really good service. Notice that the IRS's IRIS system is a free product, where Avalara 1099 is a paid version. You're going to pay around $2 to $3 to e-file each one of your forms here. So it's not a lot of money, but it's also not free. So you'll log in to the Avalara 1099. You can even import all the data of your subcontractors into the system. You can e-file from there. You can download all of the forms. You can print them out, hand deliver them to your subs. Or if you have their email addresses, you can use Avalara to email the 1099 to your subcontractors as well. Or they also have a service where they will USPS paper mail that form to your subs. And of course, they're also submitting that information electronically to the IRS. Very similar to Avalara 1099, I mean very similar, is Tax 1099, another option that you could use. Again, between $2 and $3. They're very competitive with Avalara 1099. So that's another option you can use. So IRS, IRIS, Avalara 1099, Tax 1099. And then if you already have a payroll provider, a lot of these payroll providers now also have options for contractors. So you could consider whether or not they have the option to file your 1099 NECs related to your subcontractors. That would be another option. All right, let's walk through how to fill out the form 1099 NEC. So here I just pulled up a PDF from the IRS. Notice it's red. This basically means it's not an official form, but I'm just using this for the purposes of review and this video. You're making sure that you're filling out the correct form. So form 1099 NEC, not the form 1099 miscellaneous. Notice that this was the latest version, revised January 2024. So we're reporting non-employee compensation. So the payer is us, our general contractors organization. So we'll put in our information here, name, street address, phone number, etc. Then our payer's taxpayer identification number, so your EIN or social, depending on how you're running your business. Then the recipient's taxpayer identification number, that again, that's based on the data provided on their signed W-9. So you will be referencing your subcontractor's W-9s when you complete this form. So key in their taxpayer identification number from their W-9, their name also from their W-9, street address, same, city or town, city, zip, etc. And then this box down here, second TIN not. So if you have a circumstance that relates to this box, I would strongly encourage you working with your professional, your tax provider, your accountant, etc. on this information. What this means essentially is you, in the past 3 calendar years, you've received 2 or more notices from the IRS stating that the information provided to the IRS related to your subcontractors is incorrect. For example, you provided an incorrect taxpayer identification number, which of course you would have provided from the information your subcontractor gave you. And so you've received in the past 3 calendar years 2 notices of that. If you check this box, essentially the IRS will stop sending you those notices. And of course, there's backup withholdings and other circumstances related to that matter, which I strongly encourage you working with a professional on that matter. But for the purposes of this video, we are wanting to report that total amount paid to that subcontractor for the year. And to do that, you're going to report that dollar amount, that total amount paid to that sub in that tax year on box 1, non-employee compensation. Key in that information there. Box 2, for the purposes of this video, since we work with general contractors, we're not concerned with this because that's not a matter specifically related to your businesses. 3 is reserved for later. Okay, box 4, this relates to matters in which you are required to withhold income tax from your subcontractors before paying them. And again, similar to second TIN not, if you have something like this, I strongly encourage you working with a professional on this matter. Boxes 5, 6, and 7, notice they relate to state tax implications. Now, from the federal perspective or the IRS's perspective, this information is not required. These are optional boxes included for your convenience because some states require you to provide a 1099 with this information in boxes 5, 6, and 7. Again, you would only need to provide this in those states in which they require you to provide this information on the 1099. The IRS does not require it. This box is optional from the IRS's perspective, provided to you for your convenience in filing this form with the state. Okay, now that we've walked through how to fill out Form 1099 NEC, let's get back to the fees paid to attorneys or law firms for legal services, because this is a slight exception to the general rules around corporations. To do this, let's go to the instructions for Form 1099 NEC. Okay, here we are. I am on the instruction PDF for Form 1099. You'll notice that the instructions for this form combine both miscellaneous and NEC. But for our purposes, we're only really looking at the Form 1099 NEC. So payments made to attorneys on page 8 of this PDF. The term attorney includes a law firm or other provider of legal services. Attorney's fees of $600 or more paid in the course of your trade or business are reportable in Box 1 of Form 1099 NEC under Section 6041A, little a1. All right? And then this relates to more of the 1099 miscellaneous. So gross proceeds, that's if you win a lawsuit and you have gross proceeds from that lawsuit winnings. Those will be reported on 1099 miscellaneous, which we're not talking about here. But we are talking about payments made to corporations for legal services. The exemption from reporting payments made to corporations does not apply to payments for legal services. Therefore, you must report attorney's fees in Box 1 of Form 1099 NEC, as described earlier, to corporations that provide legal services. So again, if your subcontractors are organized as corporations, filing the Form 1099 NEC is optional. However, there is an exception. If you have paid legal fees to an attorney or a law firm, regardless of whether or not they're a corporation, you're going to want to file the Form 1099 NEC. So we've walked through when and how to fill out Forms 1099 NEC. We've discussed that we're required to provide this information to the IRS and subcontractor by January 31st. Now, what are the failure to file penalties if you don't file Forms 1099 NEC? And to do that, we'll jump back to the web browser. All right, so I have pulled up the IRS's website, payments, informational return penalties. So the 1099 NEC is an informational return. It's not an actual tax return. That's what that means there. And so the IRS charges penalties for each information return you fail to correctly file on time and each payee statement you fail to provide. So again, if you've got 50 subcontractors that you're required to file a 1099, these penalties would be multiplied by those 50 subcontractors, essentially. All right, so for the year they are due, so for tax year 2023, the return is due by January 31st of 2024. So if you filed that 1099 up to 30 days late, the penalty would be $60. If it's 31 days late through August 1st, if you file any time between that period, you would be assessed a $120 penalty per return. If after August 1st or not filed at all, you'd pay $310 in penalties. And let's not forget interest as well. But notice this last column, intentional disregard, also known as willful neglect. So if you watch this video and you're aware of your filing requirements of filing these 1099 NECs, if you paid someone $600 or more during the year, and you decided, I'm not going to file that, then you would be subject to at least $630 penalty for the failure to file that one return. And again, if you have 50 subcontractors, then you'd multiply that fee by 50. Also for intentional disregard, just in general for the IRS, if there is intentional disregard or willful neglect, there's really no limit to the penalty that the IRS can assess you. So definitely this video is to share with you how to be compliant, not ways to skirt being compliant. So I'm not going to go too in the weeds here, but just know in general with the IRS, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. So if the IRS decided that you have neglected to file this, you intentionally neglected to file this, then you could be on the hook to prove that you did not intentionally disregard the filing of these forms. So how would the IRS know whether or not you were subject to filing these forms and you didn't do it? So to do that, on any business tax return, there will be these questions. So I pulled up the Schedule C from Form 1040. Same sort of questions on the 1065 partnership return, the 1120, the 1120S, etc. You will see these questions. So on this return, it's letter I and letter J. Did you make any payments in 2023 that would require you to file Forms 1099? And we've gone over what those requirements are in this video. So you would check yes or no. Yes, I made payments to subcontractors for $600 or more. Yes. Well, then if you selected yes, did you or will you file the required Forms 1099? So you would need to answer this honestly and truthfully that you did fill out those forms, or no, you didn't fill out those forms. And this is one way that the IRS could be triggered to know whether or not you filled out those forms. One other way, and I'm sure there's a myriad of ways, but I'm just going over two for now. Another way is if your subcontractor was on top of their information, they knew you paid them $10,000 for the year and they never received a 1099. Well, they could report that failure to file to the IRS, and then the IRS may or may not investigate that. So that's another one to keep in mind. All right, quick recap to wrap up this video. Forms 1099 NEC are due by January 31st for total amounts paid of $600 or more to non-employee workers over the course of the tax year. This includes all workers who are not operating as corporations. The only exception to this requirement are law firms and attorneys paid for legal services. Even if the attorneys are organized as corporations, you are required to use Form 1099 NEC to report fees for legal services of $600 or more paid during the tax year. Okay, thanks so much for watching. If you value this type of content, I encourage you to comment on this video and subscribe to our channel so we can be encouraged to produce more content like this. And there will definitely be more content like this coming soon. Thanks so much.